So Nathaniel, I believe we now have a lunch discussion, which is a open webinar with some panelists. So I don't know if you want to introduce the panelists before we shift into that mode.
Sure, I would love to do that. So first of all, thank you very much, Phil and Dev, and I believe David Kasdan as well, for serving as chairs and moderators. And thank you very much to Steve and the other presenters for excellent talks. So yes, we're going to have a lunch discussion now, and this is just an open webinar. And I've invited a few people to just come on Zoom and just start talking about whatever they want to talk about. And they can certainly interact with the chat. You know, anyone else who is a panelist is free to jump in. It's all good. So I guess we'll start off with, is Angel Vasquez on? Is he on yet?
I believe I saw Angel a little early. Yes, he's there. He just hasn't unmuted yet.
I'm here.
So wait, before you start talking, you have a new title, don't you?
Yes, we should recognize your recent achievement.
Yes, you are now the 2021 Dayton Amateur of the Year.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming from the 2020 Amateur of the Year.
and actually, Tamitha, would you mind to just say, I see you're on there. Would you mind to say hello for a minute?
Tamitha's here.
Oh, there she is.
Hello, guys.
Hi, Tamitha.
Hi there. Thanks for having me as a panelist. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And Angel,
Yes.
I am so grateful to have you be the Amateur of the Year, and I get to like kind of ride on your coattails just a little bit.
Because you're Tamitha, you are the technical achievement winner of the year, right?
What coattail?
Yeah.
So we have two fantastic award winners here, and then we also have a few other friends. We have Scotty Cowling and Steve Serwin, who you've already heard from today. And then we also have David McGaw, N1HAC. He is the research engineer from Dartmouth College, and he also gives a lot of contribution and both scientific and technical oversight to what we're doing on the Personal Space Weather Station projects. So I'd like to welcome all of you, and just have a nice time chatting. I'll be in and out, and everyone can enjoy lunch and join in the conversation.
Nathaniel, we can also be in and out, right?
That's right, yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
I just want to say I'm running for Amateur of the Minute, but I just haven't figured out which minute I'm going to run.
Doesn't John Ackerman like run for Amateur of the Nanosecond?
Oh, wait.
Is that minute or minute?
Minute, that's it.
Could I ask a quick question to our distinguished 2021 awardees there, because Angel and Tamitha, both in different contexts, you have been leading a lot of the public outreach kind of part to what we do. And I just wonder if you have any messages for this community, or maybe we could think about ways we could help that.
Ladies first.
Angel, if you allow me to go first, I'm going to take up the whole time. The entire lunch hour. Be careful what you wish for. Yes, and Nathaniel already knows, because I've been grading on him for several years, what we really need, and this is to take this beyond just the scientific community, beyond just people who are citizen scientists and the amateur radio community in general. What we really need to make space weather part of terrestrial weather and be embraced as this cross-disciplinary platform where people are going to start studying it, meteorologists are going to start reporting it, and people are going to start understanding it, is we need real-time nowcasting tools that don't just give us a picture of, what is the propagation to right this second, and then refresh with another picture right this second. What we need are movies. What we need are time lapses that show the evolution over time of how these things propagate. And some of the most mesmerizing stuff that you end up showing with the ray tracing things, with Nathaniel, the work that you did as a graduate student, is you actually show some of these evolving movies. And there is nothing like visualizations that can really show this. So when I do space weather forecasts, and this is what I've been kind of scratching the back of Nathaniel for a while, trying to get him to get him into an uncomfortable place enough that he'll move on this, is to allow us to create these movies that even over a course of a day, where people ask, okay, what was the propagation like today? We have stacked time, plots of maybe, I don't know, 10-minute cadence, half an hour cadence. I'll take even an hour cadence over a 24-hour period and be able to play it back to back to back to back to back and show the evolution anywhere on the globe, or at least in the United States, show how the gray line goes over. If there's a TID that comes over, you can actually watch the ripple effects, not necessarily of what the ionosphere is doing, but you can watch the contacts disappear and reappear in different frequencies. And if you can just put that into a motion, a time-lapse motion picture, it will be amazing how much will be revealed to those who do not understand ionospheric propagation, those who have no idea how to spell the word magnetosphere, those who have no idea what a magnetometer even is. And yet you will be able to convey such a wealth and a depth of information to a much broader audience. And I will be using things like that in my forecasts all the time, because half of my forecast does do that. It talks about what has happened over the past day or the past week. And that is a huge learning tool. So this is something I'm really, really begging this community, HamSci community, to start thinking about. Not so much that you have to do the outreach, but to be able to give us this running history. Even if we only can do nowcasting, we can't do forecasting. That is a good place to start. So please, if you can, kind of put that in the corner of your mind, in the back of your mind, as you work on creating these tools, that this kind of thing would be an incredible help to the community and to the public at large.
This is WeatherBug on my phone, and you're right. I can hit maps and I can hit play, and people maybe have come to expect that. That's a good point.
But along those lines,
Yes.
though, I think it was what John showed. Didn't you have the map of the Doppler shift over a year's time? That was in your presentation, right, John?
Actually, that was in Christina's presentation. She had
Christina's.
the simulation of
Anyway,
that.
the fascinating thing I saw out of that was when you said, "Oh, look, you can see the equinox and the solstice," because you can see the peak move. You can see the peak move back, and I'm thinking, well, wouldn't that be cool to have something like that, only show whisper spots, or show how they come and go with the day and how they come and go with the season. So exactly what you're saying, Tamitha, is I want a year's worth of what does the propagation look like on 15 meters.
And that,
what we will end up seeing, and what we will end up seeing is that we will see weather. People will look at it and they'll see weather, and they'll see how weather, instead of it just being a cloud that goes over and causes a rainstorm and makes the ground wet, or as the sun gets parted by, the cloud blocks the sun, and so you get shadows moving across the mountains. What you will see will be the weather patterns and how they affect now radio propagation.
So you'll see
people will
weather
absolutely
radar.
grab onto it like weather. Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be like
We're
weather radar.
starting-
Right?
It'll feel like
Dev was
everything
showing.
everybody's already known.
Yeah, Dev was starting to show that this morning too. He had these really nice movies of the ionograms, and you could see it go from the non-spread conditions to the spread conditions. They're just beautiful movies.
Yeah, one of the things I'm
we
hoping
need
comes
those in real time.
Yeah.
one of the things I'm hoping comes from our network is we'll get a sense of the patchiness of the ionosphere. We keep getting presented with the idea that it's like this mirror that things bounce off of, and it's homogeneous, but in fact, it's got a lot of structure to it.
Right.
Tamitha, did you see Bill Engelke's talk?
I saw some of it. Yes,
Some of
I
it.
had to help my daughter, unfortunately.
Oh,
so-
that's okay. But yeah, so he already has running a real-time version of the Doppler spectrum. And so you could see the real-time change spread in the Doppler as you see sunrise and sunset. So he has that running right now. So that is being implemented.
But I missed that. What I thought was that was just done essentially for this presentation, and it has to be, it's not something that can be done or accessed in anything close to real time. Did I misunderstood that then?
Well, I think what's going to have to, so for that project, we're still very much in the hardware development phase. and we don't have all of the software going up to the main server yet. But I guess the question would be for Bill, is there, do we have in the plans for the central server to be able to see some of those visualizations in real time?
You know, that is part of the project that hasn't really been explored yet. We have a lot of options on what to do there. Certainly, if folks tell me what analyses and visualizations are desired, we will do everything within our funding to
Sure.
make
I
them
would-
happen.
I would think that would not be part of the core server
Well,
component.
You know, can I just one thing, and then I wanted to hear what Angel's perspectives are as a person who's run nearly every high school student in Puerto Rico through, for example, the Arecibo telescope. But I think it's important to do something too. I've seen too many times this kind of visualization product get put as the, yeah, we'll get to that when we have time kind of thing, and not explicitly funded from the outset. And sometimes you have to push the agencies a little bit to make them do that. But Tamitha is right on the money, is that you are never going to get that broader view of things. The meteorologists are lucky in that 50 years ago, you could put, temperature sensors down on the ground, and it was easier to deploy these sort of things. And so they've kind of got a little bit of a head start in doing that. Plus, people live in the middle of the weather, so they want to know if it's going to rain tomorrow. But I honestly think that too many of these conversations end up in a, well, yeah, we'll do that later after the fact. And honestly, it's got to be much more prioritized, I think.
Well, we should be setting this up like we do weather maps.
Yes.
But
yes.
with funding, like time
Yeah,
and
well,
effort.
that's the thing. We got to get the funding.
Yes.
Well, one of the
But
things.
wait a minute. But wait a minute. Hang on. Let me just jump in for just a second. The funding, it's like the field of dreams, right? If you build it, they will come. If you make the visualization, or even just a prototype, a baseline point of departure, any type of point, concept idea that doesn't even work all that well, but just gives us a little bit of a hint, the funding will come, because meteorologists and meteorology and new pots of money will open up. Because that's what we're trying to do is as we blend the field of space weather into the field of operational meteorology, the meteorologists are eating this stuff up like candy.
Yeah.
And the field will explode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because they're going to realize that they have there's a huge aspect that they haven't had, they've never been able to dive in before. And all of these meteorologists would love to be spacefaring.
Yeah.
They're-
So you have to
they're very
the
into
seat.
that.
This
This
is
is
a
a
totally
dedicated-
different
We've had times
undertaking.
when-
Will they displace us? Where will we go?
What's that?
I'm sorry, say again.
Like if all these sorry, I take that back.
Okay.
But I think this is a good discussion too, because one of the things we have to remember about how we got this whole personal space weather station thing funded is we basically had one of these HamSci meetings. It was the HamSci meeting at Case Western in 2018 that we basically got up and said, we should put one of these things together. And then we started saying we would do it, and we came up with a concept paper, and it just happened there was a call for that. So, I mean, we are getting to the point where we need to start figuring out what we're going to do next with the personal space weather station. Because
Don't you think, though, that part of this has to do with the fact that you have to have the infrastructure in place first? And then you can say, okay, now that we've got 3,000 weather stations, what are we going to do with the data?
Well, I don't know, Scotty. If you wait too long, you never get there. Even something substandard, or what we might think of as is honestly, to a community like Tamitha says that has never seen any of this before, is eye-opening. So you almost have to do a little bit of that in parallel. It's like the seed.
And we already have things that we can start doing this. We have data we can start working with. Christina has her grape data, which she's shown, done some visualizations with. We're starting to, Dev has been working with UHA's chirp sounder code. We're starting to see things there. We can make visualizations there. Steve Kepler just did a talk on the ray traces where we can simulate data. We can model things ahead of time, and we can predict what we should see. And so, and then we have all of the RBN and WhisperNet data too. So we have all of this data that we can already start working with, and we can start putting together some of these little practice visualizations that Tamitha is talking about.
Sure.
And we could start looking at, okay, yeah, what are we going to explore next, and how are we going to make these visualizations?
It
Well,
just seems-
here's something to consider. You have a good forum for this here. Why don't we right here on this conference put out a call for volunteer programmers who, once we have decided on some visualizations that we want to do, to call people who are willing to volunteer their time. If we have to do this before we have funding, I'm all for it, as long as we can get the people to do it.
I just think that it's contrary to the normal evolution of things, because look at FT8, for instance. Nobody said, I want to build a mode that everybody's going to use and everybody wants this. I think that what happened is that the code was invented, the encoding was invented, and the ham said, oh, wow, look at that, that's cool, and boom, and they just adopted it. So what's going to happen? I mean, it could happen either way, and I'm not saying not to plan for it, but it could happen the other way, that it's not really going to get momentum until you have a wide enough network of data generators to produce the data that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can do both, though, because if we have some prototype demos of some cool stuff that can be done, that'll also motivate more people to put in tangerine stations and grape stations.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like
feed on each other.
That's kind of the vision.
That's very true.
The vision difference. So you say, oh, I can see what we can do with this. Let's sell that now, even before we're really ready, and get people excited about it.
I think you need to show what can be done, or no one will ever
Well, I mean,
accommodate it.
David, that's kind of where Steve was going, which was to set up toy models and
I
show
totally agree.
what can be done.
Yeah,
you can do
no,
some flavor of
it's
that.
Scotty I'm disagreeing with.
Well, and then I do really want to hear from Angel there, because again, he's had a lot of experience with a wider audience. There are places in our field where we have some kind of model that we know is somewhat wrong, where we steer the model based on the few kind of very similarly limited, measurement points we have, which is better than nothing at all. And we do have enough kind of background models that you could do some approach like that one. It also has the benefit of then showing people, well, look, where we have measurements, the model is not always doing right. Hey, can you please add more points to this so that we can make that kind of model better? And so, it's the careful working of how you want to motivate expansion. Anyways.
I'd like to throw this out there if I could real quick. Anybody who wants to come on, I live stream on YouTube every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. And we'll usually have, I don't know, 100 to 300 people watching us, depending on the topic. Some topics are more popular than others. I've talked to Scotty about this at the Tapper the last time we were all able to travel together. That's just how long the Tangerine SDR has been in play. But I'd love to bring somebody, one or two or multiple of you, onto a live stream one night and just talk to my audience about everything you guys are just talking about right now. Show it to the world. We might have a couple hundred people watching us, but then that YouTube video will be replayable on YouTube forever. And, generally speaking, my videos get a few thousand views over the course of the couple months after it airs, something like that. So I would love to do that. I want to get one of these things and put it up here at my house and share that data with the world and kind of, revisit it every month or two and say, oh, hey, by the way, here's the current project of the status of this project. And here's my personal station, do a screen share. Here's what I'm sharing. Here's how you can get involved and kind of keep it rolling like that. Cause I think this is a really cool topic. I'm not a space scientist. You guys are talking about stuff that's way over my head, but I can let you talk about it intelligibly and put it on YouTube and share it to everybody. So that's kind of my thought. If that works.
And one other thing I wanted to mention is the neat thing about where we are in space weather in terms of radio propagation, or looking at it from a point of view of operational weather. The space science side is very academic. They're not really all into the operations side. At least most of them aren't. They look at it as kind of being engineering as opposed to academia. And so they're more interested in writing papers. But the terrestrial meteorology side of the house is so used to operations, that's their bread and butter. And because the populace gets the terrestrial weather on the 6 o'clock news every night, they're immersed in it. This is part of their life. I mean, it's, you know, like finding the remote control. They know how to do it. So we have, what's neat is in operational space weather, we have to look at it from a different point of view than we look at academia. In academia, those are concepts that are very hard to drive, and it's very hard to even get a NSF, you know, proposal through, because half the time the reviewers you deal with don't even know what you're talking about. But in operational side of the house, trying to get that information out, it's very easy because terrestrial weather has set the precedent. And as we begin to get the information out there, and even if we do bad visualizations, people will grab it in very intuitively simply because they've seen it before. They've seen it in terrestrial weather. So we already have part of that path paved. So even though we would be hacking through with machetes, and I do believe that we will have to demonstrate it. So Scotty, you've got yet another downvote. Sorry, I disagree. I do believe that we have to pave the way. Otherwise, it will never happen. But I think unlike many fields where hacking through the weeds is the first time anyone's ever done it, we have an analog in terrestrial weather that's kind of already paved sort of that way for us. And all we have to do is just find the right way of linking the two and following their path to a great degree. And the world will open up for us a lot faster than it does for pretty much any other field that doesn't have that you know, precedent set, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Tamitha,
I'll
can I
shut up
ask
now, 'cause
you
I've taken way too much time.
an orthogonal question? I'm interested that you're sitting in a recording studio.
Yes. My video studio was a recording studio. This is what got me through grad school. I built this recording studio, and I actually did recordings for albums for Los Angeles underground bands for my entire graduate career. And I bought all the gear and everything. You can probably see more gear here. Yeah, it's pretty expensive. And then I ended up getting into television stuff because of my husband. And I realized I then had a PhD in space physics, and I had a video audio studio, and everybody was saying, we need people on Weather Channel. So I went, oh, I can do this. So that's when my career took a right turn and went away from being a complete scientist to being the space weather woman. And the rest.
Have you ever crossed paths with a
already know.
synclavier?
A synclavier? No.
It's a synthesizer and recording instrument from the 80s and 90s. I was an engineer on that, and then my career
Oh,
took
no
a turn.
kidding. And then did you become a amateur radio operator before that or after that?
It was after that, though I was interested long before that.
Yeah, well, you know, that's very common. Amateur radio
Actually, it
operators
was in
and
the
music
middle.
go together.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Bob Heil, right? So.
Yep.
Anyway, Angel, you need to speak. You haven't had a chance.
Yeah, I now we know why you won the Technical Achievement Award. Thank you for all that. Those was great information. Thanks, and thank you, HamSci and Nathaniel, and Phil, and everyone. I appreciate that. And this is the second time, I guess, Tamitha, we're on the same kind of a stage. We also talked there in the Dayton Antenna Forum one year. So
I'm on a video conference right now, so.
So anyway.
Stay out of the view of the camera unless you want to.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, thank you. And I want to thank everyone also for all your well wishes and congratulatory comments. And it's funny, It's funny, ham radio. It's and I'll speak more on the ham radio side. Yeah. The ham radio, it's funny that you get awarded kind of for things you do like normally. These are just things that we did. And I've spoke to this in the past when we got the YASME award for the Hurricane Maria stuff. And I was saying, they gave me the award, but I said, and here's my brother Jim Breakalls right here. He was there, and I said, if I called when that happened, and I called And Jim was one of the first ones, obviously, to answer, along with so many other friends. But you guys were the ones that answered, right? If you guys didn't answer, I would have been nowhere. So I mean, I always said, and I stood up and went during that presentation, and I gave everyone there an applause because you guys were the real heroes. You guys were the ones that helped me out doing with all these communications. Obviously, there were hundreds and hundreds that that again, Jim and Joe Taylor, all these guys were all friends, and I use that all the time, especially when people say about amateur radio. That's always a kind of a diminutive type of a position. You say amateur, especially for like me. I'm in the and in a professional way at the Arecibo Observatory. But when I say we had Joe Taylor or Jim Breakwall or the vice president of Cornell. These guys were all the ones that answered me during the hurricane. So and there's nothing amateur about these guys. So I kind of use that all the time. And also there is a kind of a rainbow at a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. We get an Arecibo. We've been through a lot since 2018. We had the hurricanes, and then we had the all those earthquakes. When we had 50 earthquakes in a day, 500 in a 2-week period. I'm talking. I mean, we're talking about shake, rattle, and roll, and this thing was really bad. And so then we had obviously the demise of the radio telescope. And so this, I guess the best way to put it is, I have to quote again Jim. He said, we've been through a lot. And then that 1 week kind of made up for a whole lot of things. And so I was nominated, cited as the Amateur of the Year. And luckily enough, I almost didn't, run a contest. We had a contest, ARRL DX contest, right after a few hours. So it didn't really sink in because I was so involved in the contest. And which, by the way, I'm #1 in the world. And so I wasn't even running. I wasn't even going to run it. So we came in low power and #1. So kind of Jim says, yeah. So all that kind of stuff, well, it made up, all that made up for it. And so again, I want to thank you all. And speaking of the observatory, I'm sure everyone wants to kind of know about that. The observatory, well, we're still, we actually got the answer from the National Science Foundation. What I mean by this is that Congress asked the National Science Foundation to their input on where they're going to go with the observatory. So there are a few, there are a lot of people on this Zoom session that have probably been in these meetings. There are a few proposals of what type of instrument we're going to be using. It will not be the same type of instrument that we did for the first 60 years or just about. It'll be some type of, and again, there are different models. There's like about 1,000 9-foot little dishes. There's another one where we have 18-foot dishes with NRAO, and there's a lot of them like this. But all in all, NSF has to get the peer, the scientific community. What is that? If they say what they want, and if it's to their liking, so to speak, then this is where they will go. They're all for it. Again, we're still doing science. We still have an air glow lab, photometer lab. We still have a LiDAR lab. We still have a 12-meter dish. Obviously, 12 meter not the same as 305 meter, but we're still doing science. We got to remember that the NSF didn't want to close the observatory. What it did, want to decommission in a safe manner the telescope after the collapse of those cables. But obviously, that was just it was just so bad ever since those cables just started to pop, and we were hearing. That's why a lot of people say, "How did you have a drone when it happened?" Because we were monitoring all the time, because we were hearing, you could hear those guitar strings kind of pop. And so that's why when you saw that video, there was a drone there. But anyway, so NSF is holding by. So it's just the the scientific community and see what they're thinking. And again, those proposals are out there. So, and so again, I thank you. I thank you all, and thank you for letting me in and be part of this again. And hopefully, we'll do this again in person there, Nathaniel, because we really had a great time when we went down there to Case.
Thank you. I agree. That was a great meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason the reason I brought that up, Angel, was that
Yeah.
just in terms of numbers, you guys ran more I mean, the entire island in a certain range at one point passed through the visitor center. I mean, I understood that every high school student at one point in their 4-year track would go
Oh
through
yes.
Arecibo, right?
Oh yes, definitely. That the public outreach is a big deal there, Phil. It's a very big deal, and we're very involved. And we got to thank all our scientists and their staff. And it's something that we're very proud of. We've made scientists, we've made people go into the field because of our summer student project, our ongoing projects, and all the. I mean, one thing, and we're proud of this, that the agenda, the public school and the private school agenda, one of their agendas is they must visit the observatory because we have that visitor center, and we do take the time. I personally love it when they go up there, and I just show up. Sometimes I'll just leave my office and go up there, and I just love to talk to the people there because sometimes they'll talk to someone else, but I love to give them also a different type of perspective, and so that is such a big deal there, Phil. And the visitor center itself didn't suffer any damage, but the learning center, unfortunately, there was some damage up on the roof, but it's repairable, and that is still. And we're still doing things virtually with the community, but unfortunately, right now, because we have this huge cleanup process, we've got the same cleanup crew that was in the Twin Tower cleanup process. Those guys are down here doing the debris removal here. And so we're going to get all that repaired, and definitely the public outreach is a big part of the observatory there, Phil. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I know you must have developed strategies for having to dealt with that many members of the general public that you found worked. And I just wondered if there were one or two general thoughts you had about kind of what things worked when you've got, the average person coming in and you got to motivate why you're looking at space science. Other than space is cool, right? I mean, people like to think about spacecraft, what have you, but it's kind of what Tamitha said before, which is that if you can't see the thing and you can't see radio waves, you're already kind of one step removed from the touch it kind of thing. And
Right.
there are ways that don't work, but I know there are ways that do work. So I just wondered what you guys found worked.
Yeah, well, again, we can draw them in because of the telescope. Okay, we had and something that I always said we always had the world's largest radio radar telescope, and a lot of people would say my QSL card is incorrect. No, my QSL card was always correct. It says world's largest radio radar telescope. So we had that going for us, and so we get them in the door. Okay, and the kids love to see what, like you say, they like to see something first. So once we had their attention, then we had the 2 levels of exhibits inside the visitor center. And so again, we got to give credit to also all the teachers that also got their students involved. Once we got them in there, and then we did our best. Again, we not only had we didn't have only tour guides per se. We had professional staff members. We had scientific, members, engineers, and everyone being a part of this. And science is it's something like the kids really can get into this, and I'm telling you, it's so great to do this with the kids when you can show them something, you can actually. And they can see the results, and they can see the results from what this telescope was doing. We had some of these exhibits, and so it's also a credit to them. But our staff was just fantastic. And how did it work? I think it was just a mixture of everyone's effort there, Phil. It was just a whole mixture. And again, it's something that's still ongoing.
Right, right.
Joe,
So yeah, go
Angel,
ahead,
can I-
Tamitha.
Yeah, I have a question, a little bit about the demographics. When you had visitors there, did you guys ever kind of keep track, or do you have kind of even just a semblance of where people were from? You know, was it mainly just local kids that would come, or would people fly in from all over to see, or was there one particular country or so that was more highly represented than another? I mean, that's something I'm very interested in, is to see
Sure, we
how
actually kept
tightly knit
track.
that community is.
I
you
actually wrote a little program on that, a little exhibit. I made a little exhibit, and when everyone would check in, you would check off where you're from. It was like
Okay.
an internet type of exhibit. Remember, we opened the visitor center around '95, and the internet was still kind of new there. So we did keep track of this, and obviously the biggest portion was from Puerto Rico. When we have the students, we take them in a special group. Okay, we take them apart in a special group. So we give them, well, you know, you have to make a reservation, and we'll come in. So we'll treat them, and any group like this. We had groups from all over. And so if you had a group of about over 6 or 7, let's say 10, we will assign someone to you. And so that's how we kept track of this, and we did keep track of where people come from. Obviously, the U.S. was a very big visitors of the observatory, and hams are from all over the world, and also a lot of people from Germany came down, and Italy, Europe, and per se. So yes, we did keep track of that. We did keep track.
Now, let me
So
add
that
a couple things about Angel there. This is Jim. Actually, if you were a ham and you were coming in as a regular visitor, but you were a ham and somehow the people found out you were a ham, that was an instant phone call to Angel's office. And then Angel, whatever he was doing, and this went on years before the visitor center even started, Angel would take whatever he was doing, and he would invite the hams over, and he gave them what was called the VIP tour. And if you were ever lucky to be on the VIP tour, you really saw a lot of the observatory underneath. And even the old days, you could go to the platform even, Angel. I know you took many hams up there too. And so I just can't believe how many, if you counted all the hams.
Oh, I can't. I put that out on my QRZ page. I actually wrote, if you look at my QRZ page, I actually say, if you're a ham, call me up and I'll give you a VIP tour. And I kept my word. Just like Jim said. And you don't know, I was like head of operations / tour guide. And so, but they're all for hams. And we did many. Thanks, Jim, for saying that.
And then also, a lot of those hams became friends for life too, you know, like Howard you can think of, and some of the other ones there.
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Earth, Wind, and Fire, yeah.
He still writes
Is that
to me
harp
today.
behind you?
Yes, I'm up at Harp right now. It's a little cool up here.
Oh, good. I like that weather. I've been there.
I'm not here now, but I am going up in May. We have some experiments with the Navy in May.
Well, I was up there in the winter.
Yeah,
Some years ago, we did an experiment with that. Talk about radar. And I don't know if people remember, speaking of ham and radar, is that from HARP, they had sent a 7 megahertz signal, bounced it off the moon, lowest frequency EME.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm going to the Aleutian Islands, and we're gonna have a barium release cloud, and then HARP is going to be transmitting into that, and we're going to watch the echoes coming back into a big array, a receiving array with Paul Bernhardt. Some of you may know Paul Bernhardt from NRL.
Yeah. Well, I'm at Wallops right now putting a rocket together. It's a VLF experiment.
Okay, he was just at Wallops, and they had a chemical release, I think, a few weeks. Yeah.
But you know, Angel and Jim have just pointed out again the international nature of what we're doing too. You know, we're a virtual conference, and as Nathaniel mentioned at the beginning, you know, we've got people coming in from. Someone said greetings from Japan. We've got people from Asia and South America and all over the place.
And Norway.
Yeah, and the whole Scandinavian sector, and that's another opportunity to sort of broaden the outreach here is to point out that, yeah, this is an international community. And so Tamitha's shaking her head there. Yes, I figured that might be attractive, I would think, in some contexts.
I had actually loaded that question on purpose because I wanted to get to something, which was about HamSci and about, everything that we've been showing on all the talks today have been very America-centric. We're talking about the WhisperNet. We're talking about distribution of magnetometers across the continental United States, especially the lower half of it. We've dropped those magnetometers. I get the focus is America-centric. But when we're talking about future and we're talking about things like, okay, where should we be looking if we're going to be thinking 2 steps ahead?
Mm-hmm.
Should how much of this community is thinking about when you're doing the software and you're thinking about the data reduction, and you're thinking about the massive amount of data and how detailed you want the maps to be and how spatially resolved do you want things to be? How many of you are actually also thinking about the global side of it? Where could you do if you ended up suddenly selling, let's say, obviously manufacturing would be a difficult thing to keep up with, but let's say you sold 10,000 personal space weather stations that were delivered to Japan, Russia, Norway. All of a sudden you're getting them all over the place. I mean, I just had to respond to a request for a virtual talk in Ireland to a radio club in Ireland. I didn't even know that Ireland, that many people in Ireland paid attention to my stuff, at least ham radio anyway. So, I mean, this is an international community, and it's growing very rapidly, and HamSci is becoming very visible, and so is the personal weather station. So it's kind of, it may be folly to think that this should be an American-centric thing. And so when you're making your software products and you're thinking about all of this stuff, how many of us are actually thinking about it from a global perspective, that you might actually need to do data reductions globally? And then think of a rotating Earth, and have the gray line on 2 sides of the planet. Mm-hmm. I mean, is anyone thinking in that regard, or you guys, is it mostly just a flat map and we're thinking
I think Christina is actually thinking about it a lot right now.
Yeah, I was just going to look up how many countries we got for the Eclipse festivals, but it was more than 20. I mean, I put out those calls and got people on every continent except Antarctica, and we're working on that one. So there's definitely global interest and participation. There was a plot that I showed in my presentation here that I showed at Tapper as well, which was taken by some Dutch hams. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've been doing with those experiments is, translating them into multiple languages to make them more accessible for people. And I'm going to try to have one unified set of instructions so that people can take Doppler data where you have language selection. And so far, I think I'm going to be able to put together Chinese, Spanish, Portuguese, Norwegian. We'll have some international reach for that. There were some people also asking about for time standard station measurements. There's a lot of spots where when you hear a 10 megahertz time standard station, there's multiple candidates that it could be. And if you, in the continental United States, once you've solved that problem for WWV versus WWVH, you are closer to solving it for WWV versus PPE or WWVH versus BPM. So yeah, I think that collecting international data, this is one of the fun things about the pilot experiments, is you at least get some fundamental thing that you can test your approaches out on, to have a data set for that. Doing these things where we sort of prototype the process all the way through and then come back and define it and iterate multiple times, I think is the right approach for developing that pipeline from idea to experimental design to execution to analysis to visualization. Do that on one scale, and then you come back and you say, okay, what can we do better in the next iteration?
By the way, one thing that would be helpful for this research for us is a compilation of all the different signals that are on those frequencies. I personally have, of course, heard WWV, WWVH, but I've also heard Brazil and China on 10 megahertz.
I think
And it took a
Jim-
little searching to figure out which one I was hearing.
Yeah, I'm working on that. One thing that's
Christina,
worth noting. Yeah.
Have you talked to Jim Farmer? He's been starting to compile a list of those things.
Yes, he sent me a really excellent list. Thank you for bringing that up. Because the thing is, there are certain sources that are authoritative on what's on there, especially BIPM has a list of time standard stations, right? But then there's experimental stations in and around, say, 10 megahertz that don't show up on that list. So like we encountered this in the June data, was a phenomenon where a lot of stations in Europe were picking up a station in Italy that I didn't know existed until we were halfway through the practice day, and I'm getting the same email from like 5 different people. And that's what's wonderful about having a big volunteer team, is that folks will let you know these kinds of observations that you'd never be able to make otherwise.
Nathaniel, we should mention that. Do you remember we had that conversation with someone in South Africa? Do you remember that? You were visiting us up at the Haystack, and we had talked.
he has a poster, I think.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Right.
Hans? Yeah.
That's right, Hans. Yes.
Yeah,
So-
he
so
he has a poster tomorrow.
Yeah, so Tamitha, between that and RSGB in the UK has been doing things for a very long time, of course. The former Soviet Union is a little harder to get on board, probably just because of communications and resources over there. But so it's beginning to happen a bit. I can tell you in the professional world, you probably have seen these global TEC maps. We saw a few of them. I mean, they're inherently global because, of course, everybody wants to know what continental plates are doing. So, that's happening kind of naturally because that's where the data is. But you make a good point that we should remember to do the international visualizations from the start here when we're putting this stuff together.
I mean, some of so you'll see Diego's talk. He's my student later, and his talk is going to have both U.S. and Europe-centric plots in it. He has both of those, and the reason for that is, I actually started with the global map, and I was looking at RBN and WSPR data, and it just turned out that the 2 hotspots where I had enough data to actually see what I was looking for was Europe and US, and that's just how it worked out. But
and what I want to make sure that you understand is that very, very quickly, when this becomes a commodity, when people can start buying the personal weather station, that distribution is going to change, and it may change very rapidly, especially as the solar cycle ramps up.
Yeah,
So
I
just
think
don't
we're
lock-
hoping
and I
for
don't want you
that.
to lock yourself into the mindset. Yes,
Yeah.
and I just don't want you to lock your mindset into that. It's just going to be the hot spots just get hotter, and that's really all it's going to be.
And
Well,
I think
Probably not.
well, what's good is we're starting to already with Dev's project. Dev, the way we were doing the oblique ionosons is we got that program from Juha up in Norway. So he's already been writing his code to be able to monitor these ionosons globally, automatically detect them globally. So he's already thinking about that. We've got Ben Vitfleet on here. He's over in the Netherlands. So we have Hans down in South Africa that we've talked with a little bit. So we're starting to gradually bring in more of these people who are international and can also help to give us that perspective.
Well, and
And
it's
that's
not
gonna
like
be really
TIDs don't occur globally. And we know that there are those 2 large ham populations in landmass areas like Europe and North America that give you the opportunity for a lot of quick and easy research data. And we're kind of counting on, once we get the personal space weather station developed, that there will be relatively widespread adoption of that and be able to fill in a lot of the holes that exist.
One of the things I would love to be able to do, and I know it's not the right frequency necessarily that HamSci works with, because we're not talking about 1.5 gigahertz. We're not talking about the L1 and L2 bands. But looking at how radio propagation, especially at low latitudes, when we start getting into the area of Brazil, for example, they know very, very well down in Brazil that in the summertime during plasma bubble season after sunset, GPS just doesn't work. Brazilians know that, you know, because of all sorts of things, because of all the plasma bubbles and the equatorial anomaly and all of that. That's just a way of life for them down there. But Amazon Air doesn't know that, right? And they're ready to fly drones. They're already flying drones all around many areas at low latitudes. And it's going to become very scary here soon, especially as you should see some of the things that they're planning to have drones do, like medevac, for example. And that kind of thing is, and search and rescue, that kind of thing is a bit dangerous when these pilots don't necessarily know what they're dealing with in terms of what the ionosphere can do to these signals. Even even a gigahertz level signals, you can get scintillation. So having something like this that ends up being global, not focused in the sweet zone, because let's face it, United States is pretty much a sweet zone, right? We're lower than the auroral oval typically, and we're higher than the equatorial anomaly. So we've got this really nice area where radio propagation is just beautiful relative to many other parts of the world. So being able to have that global perspective, I think will wake a lot of people up who may think they know a lot about radio propagation or think they understand how radio signals work because they do GPS sounding or geocaching or whatever it is. They fly drones for a living. But they're going to realize very, very quickly that they need to be paying much more attention to what the ionosphere is doing than they think. And that's why I want us to try to keep this global perspective, because if we just focus on the mid latitudes, we're going to maybe get this sense of complacency that really shouldn't exist for other parts of the world, if that makes any sense.
That's a really good point. Well, I think this has been an excellent discussion, and I would like to thank all of our panelists, both the ones who are listed on the website and the ones who just joined us on a very quick invitation. It's been a really good discussion. I want to wrap up because we're getting close to the top of the hour, and we're going to be switching chairs again. So I might turn it over to our new chair, Christina Collins, KD8OXT, and let her introduce the Zoom moderators and take over running things from here.
Oh gosh, that's me. Okay, hang on. Let me pull up the, the schedule so I can remember where we're at here. All right.